Well, welcome to session 4. It's great to see you again. And I want to thank you for making mental health a priority in your life. Although this process can be challenging at times, staying with it can bring tremendous benefits. And as we go through these lessons, I want you to notice that if you feel your level of emotional intelligence increasing. Emotional intelligence is really just the ability to be aware of your own emotions and having the ability to regulate them, as well as having the ability to discern where other people's emotional states is at, and having the skills to act in a manner which supports them in regulating themselves when escalation occurs. In other words, it's simply having the ability to tune into your emotions and manage your responses, while at the same time tuning into others and knowing how to respond to them in a manner which helps to support them. It's the ability to manage your own emotions and relationships in a healthy way. And when we increase our emotional intelligence, it will bring much greater success in all areas of our life. The Hay Group, one of the largest human resources organizations in the world, consider a person's emotional intelligence way more important than a person's intelligence quotient, or IQ, when it comes to hiring people. For the reason that people who can manage their stress and have strong people skills are a valuable asset to any organization. Another global leader in the development of mental health enhancement skills for the workplace is TalentSmart. And they work with about 75% of Fortune 500 companies, and they state that 90% of top performers have high EQ. And they also say that every time a person increases their emotional intelligence score by just 1 point out of 100, it increases their ability to be more effective in their work and even earn more money. Specifically, each point of increase raises your salary an average of $1,300 per year. Wow. Empirical information like this is stacking up so fast that we can see a direct correlation between a person's emotional intelligence and things like their happiness, their ability to have more engaging and successful relationships, their experience of greater success in their work. So, let's continue our journey towards making these kinds of improvements in ourselves. So let's do a brief overview of what we've learned in the past 3 sessions.
In session 1, we talked about how our psychological functions are an amazing part of us and they make up who we are. They also determine the success that we will have in our work, our relationships, and our overall quality of life. We then talked about how our psychological functions move back and forth from being in a regulated or an escalated state. Being escalated often would be considered unpleasant and a stressful place. Becoming escalated is okay and very normal as long as we don't move into this state too often or stay in it for too long or find that we're unable to bring ourselves back to a regulated state. And then we closed by talking about how many people view their psychological functions like the color of their eyes. It's something they cannot change. They're just born with it. However, the frontiers of brain science tell us that our brains are neuroplastic, which means they can change. Each of us are capable of making positive changes to our psychological functions, which means that we create awareness and learn how to regulate ourselves when we become escalated. In session 2, we learned how to become aware of our psychological functions and how to bring ourselves from an escalated state back to a regulated state using our regulation tools. We then looked into the lives of Sue, Bill, and John as they began their journey in working to improve their psychological functions. Then we shifted and introduced engagement and how engagement works to create healthy connections between people, making us less susceptible to becoming escalated, and how actually being disconnected to people makes us highly susceptible to that escalation. In session 3, we talked about what causes us to be more susceptible in becoming escalated, which involves learning about basic emotional needs that we have and what happens when they're met or unmet or disregarded altogether. And then we talked about the deep intrinsic longings that people have for emotional connection with others. And this profound connection is experienced when these emotions are expressed and understood by others and validated. When this occurs, we experience a significant sense of feeling cared for, understood, and accepted. And having these needs met are basic to our sense of emotional safety. And when they're not met, our core survival responses of fight, flight, or freeze become activated. And if these needs are disregarded, as in a case when we feel criticized or insulted, put down, or rejected by others, our survival instincts become highly activated and we can rapidly move into that state of fight, flight, or freeze. So, here's what we're going to do today. Today we're going to talk about how to resolve conflicts better in our life, being that relational conflict is the #1 cause of escalation. Then we will look at how when we have unmet needs, such as empathy, compassion, being understood, encouragement, or validation, when we don't get those, we become more susceptible to escalation. We're also going to look at the lives of Bill, Sue, and John
and take a look at how they move from an escalated state when they don't have those needs met. And when they're in this escalated state, how much more of their mental energy is directed towards survival responses. So, let's begin by talking about how we might use aspects of emotional intelligence to reduce the negative outcome from a conflict. In the previous lesson, we discussed how the fight, flight, or freeze response can become highly activated in ourselves during a conflict. However, it is really important to remember that when we're involved in a conflict with another person, that person might also be experiencing a sense of emotional threat, and they can be triggered into their own fight, flight, or freeze response, which may drive them to react to us in destructive or harmful ways. This dynamic is very common in any relational conflict and follows a destructive formula. Anytime someone we are in relationship with, where they say or do something that is perceived as invalidation to us, our emotional needs for feeling loved and accepted, cared for and understood are violated, and our survival responses begin activated, moving us quickly into that escalated state. Usually the first response for people in this situation is to attempt to make the other person understand, to make them. However, unless good skills for regulation and effective communication have been learned well, often the attempt to make the other person understand is done in a manner that comes across as critical, invalidating, or even disrespectful, which results in the survival responses being activated in the other. At this point, a few different scenarios are possible. Number one, both people may respond to each other with the fight response, yelling, criticizing, blaming, or using put-downs, bringing stuff out of their backpack and throwing it at each other, all of which leads to further and further escalation with no hope of resolution. Number two, one or both may engage in the flight response by leaving or withdrawing in a cold, angry silence, or an attempt just to simply stop the fight. Or number three, the freeze response can occur if, out of emotional pain, the other person simply shuts down. They shut down all their sense of feeling in order to avoid a sense of being completely overwhelmed. It is important to understand that any time we move into any of these basic survival states, our brain functioning is greatly impacted. During an escalated state that comes with the activation of our survival responses, all of our mental energy goes straight into survival mode. In survival mode, the logical, the rational, the thinking part of our brain is temporarily suspended, while the emotional and instinctive reactive parts of our brain temporarily take over, often resulting in behaviors that we later regret, and we all know what that feels like. None of these scenarios that we discussed are really helpful to resolution, but without learning skills to regulate emotions and to manage our communication, these often are the outcomes of relational conflict. And many escalated conflicts and many broken relationships could be repaired by avoiding these normal but unhelpful responses. But what's the solution to these basic instinctive reactions that commonly drive us into conflict? The keys to solving this dilemma can be found in really developing our skills in the area of emotional intelligence using the following process. Step one is to recognize that the escalation is occurring, either in you or in the other person, or as typically the case, in both. It is important to remember that when we are in this emotionally escalated state, that all of our mental energy is directed towards survival responses. And in this state, we simply can't think straight. In these moments, the best thing you can do for yourself is simply to take a bit of a break from the situation in order to calm down. The most effective way to do this is to acknowledge to the other person that I would like to continue to discuss this, but I need a bit of time to calm down, and I will be back when I'm in a better place to hear your concerns. Step two. Once out of the situation, focus on using some of the regulation tools that we've discussed in previous lessons, which include engaging with a trusted friend, doing a check-in, calling a health master's coach, take a walk, work out, use breathing or relaxation exercises, work in the yard, or basically doing anything to create a temporary distraction in order for you to allow your body to begin to release its built-up adrenaline and cortisol. Number three, move into empathy by considering the other person's perspective. Reflect for yourself on what their unmet needs might be, or how they might be feeling, considering their desires or reflecting on what their perspectives might be. Take some time to reflect on the fact that the fight might be fueled by some of their unmet emotional needs, and that their survival responses might become activated during this time. During this process, it can be important to consider that it's this pattern of communication and unmet emotional needs that is driving the escalation. Make the pattern the problem, not the person. Take a few moments to reflect on your role in this pattern. And step 4, do a self-check and ask yourself, am I ready to listen to the other person's perspective? If you're not, continue to engage in the regulation activities and empathetic contemplation. And step 5, only once you're feeling calm and ready to respond to the other person in an empathetic manner should you move into step 5, which is really to listen fully to the other person's perspective prior to asking permission to express your own opinion. By following these steps for managing emotional escalation, you will reduce conflicts in your life and improve the quality of your relationships. Now I want to take a look at the journey of Bill, Sue, and John and how they're progressing. But first, let's look how progress is typically made in a person's life. Notice how person A makes significant steps forward and then experiences backward steps, following by some steps forward. Then notice a common occurrence where they have a significant fall backwards, but they're often followed by many steps forward. What's important in this journey is to realize that steps backward create high levels of awareness, which is required for progress. Until we see our need to improve the way we manage our psychological functions and relationships, improvement will not occur. Awareness is the prerequisite to change. What's important is to realize that when you're in these valleys, not to give up, and that keep going, meaning that progress often occurs soon after. For some of us that feel that we're stuck in a backward steps, it may be required to reach out for support. The way of progress is for people through being engaged with other people. This is the very design of humans, is to grow and evolve through encouragement and validation of others. The worst thing we can do is to stay stuck and be isolated. Now, let's look at Bill, Sue, and John, and while you watch them, see if you can relate to any of the challenges they face. Well, hi, Sue.
Oh, hi, Kim.
So how you been doing lately?
When I seem to get overloaded and things don't go as planned, I start getting frustrated. And the worst pain of it all is that I just have a sense of feeling all alone. I just don't sense my husband gets how hard it is to be with the kids all day. I need his or someone's support. I appreciate that what you've been trying to teach me, how to regulate myself, which has been really, really good. But I start getting frustrated and I feel like I have no control of it. And it's kind of like the regulation tools are no competition to the anger that starts coming in me.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and that's got to be a hard place for you to be.
Well, it is.
Okay, I'd like you to tell me how you feel right now.
I just feel exhausted. I feel like a failure and not capable to be a mother and a wife, let alone trying to finish my school.
Wow, I hear you. And I am so sorry that you're going through this right now.
Thank you for hearing me, Kim.
You're welcome, Sue. I mean, that's what we're here for. Would you be open to discussing a few things that may be helpful in supporting you?
Yes, of course.
Because I think learning how to be more aware of your earlier warning signs will help you. Perhaps you're trying to use the regulation tools a little bit too late in the game. So I want you to try and reach out to a friend when you experience that first emotion of frustration coming on, or perhaps you can make contact with me or somebody else from our office. Because the key thing to remember, Sue, is that trying to get more engagement from friends and loved ones and practicing more self-care. I think that would be a great help to you. Does that make sense, Sue?
Well, it does, but it's going to take some focus on doing this, and I'm going to need support from my husband and maybe my sisters.
Yeah, reaching out to people and asking for help is a humbling thing for many of us. You know, I was in this place myself at one time, and as I look back on it, asking for help was one of the greatest things I ever did for myself. I remember calling my friend and saying, You know, I need a bit of help right now, and that's why I'm calling you.
Yeah, I hear you. I am confident that my husband and a few friends would be willing to support me in making some of these changes. I guess it's just a matter of asking.
Yeah, asking is usually the challenge for many of us.
Kim, thanks for meeting with me. I just wanted to check in with you and to say what's been going on for me in regards to what I'm learning in the group session.
Well, thanks for doing that, John.
I'm sorry to say that I am at session 4 and I'm feeling pretty stupid right now. I'm just not getting it. Intellectually, I fully understand the logic in what I'm learning and about what causes me to get escalated. Even last time when we met, I was able to regulate with you, and I left that session excited. But the very next day, it happened again, and I wasn't able to do a thing about it. I feel powerless over a situation that occurred in the office, and I feel like my life lately has been in survival mode in my job.
After asking John a few questions about his day at work and his home life, it was obvious that John was experiencing work-life imbalances, resulting in isolating himself from people that potentially could meet some of his emotional needs. When he feels an escalated state coming on, he does not have the resources to draw from that would allow him to regulate on his own. He works long hours, does not exercise during busy season, and misses meals. So together, John and Kim worked on a plan to create work-life balance and to create engagement in his life. This included John reaching out to his wife to ask for support, which she was excited about, and agreed to reviewing the plan that John and Kim made together.
Hi, Kim.
Hey, Bill, how you been doing?
Well, last week was a really good week, but the last few days have been hard. I've been trying to make this regulation stuff work, but it's been up and down. I feel like I'm making progress, but, well, then I have fallen right back to my old ways most of today. So that's why I called you.
Well, thanks for calling, Bill. You did the right thing. And setbacks are a normal trajectory of growth when you're learning this stuff. You know, it's taken you over 55 years to shape your behavior to where it is right now. So be patient with yourself as you learn this stuff. And don't forget to celebrate the progress that you've made in your life.
Well, that makes sense, Kim. I can see that.
So I'm curious, what happened to take you from a regulated state into an escalated state?
Well, I got home after working overtime, and my wife asked me to do a couple of things around the house, but it's the way she said it that probably triggered me into this escalated state. And when this happens, I immediately fall into my small man syndrome, and I just want to hide. I mean, being as I don't have any energy in me to do that extra work at the time, but I also don't have the courage to say no. I feel like such a wimp. So I did the work she asked me to do, but I was exhausted, and I have a ton of animosity towards her.
So question, when you came home, if you were to check in with yourself, what would be some of the need that you would have?
I don't know. I guess I just want to hang out with my wife like we used to, but it seems we just don't connect as much like that anymore. I also miss my brother, well, since he moved away, and I haven't been able to make any new friends. I really feel alone.
Kim and Bill began to discuss how he could begin creating more relational connections in his life, beginning with his wife. They talked about the need each person has for empathy, encouragement, and validation. Bill admitted he felt clumsy initiating this type of quality time with his wife, but committed to doing it. Bill also joined an evening hockey league with some old friends and committed to meeting with Kim for the next 6 weeks for support in these new initiatives he is working on.
Okay, let's do an exercise that will help us apply this lesson to our personal life. I want you to sit back, close your eyes, and begin deep breathing. Pay attention to your body. to learn if you're in a regulated or an escalated state. Now, I want you to rank yourself from a 1 to a 10, 10 being highly escalated. Think of the last time you were escalated. When was it? Where were you? Was there anyone there with you? Try to think of where you were at before you got escalated and what events moved you into that escalated state. Now, please rank what level you became escalated to from a 1 to 10 at this time. Now, I want you to reflect to discern if there was any unmet needs that you had. Were you feeling rejected, misunderstood, not appreciated, not noticed, ignored? Perhaps someone's actions against you offended you. Now take some time to reflect on the fact that most of our escalated states are fueled by unmet emotional needs, and survival responses become activated. Now, as you continue to deep breathe, consider John and how his escalation occurred, being he was overworked and disengaged from people, forfeiting himself from his emotional needs being unmet. For Sue, she lacked sufficient engagement with her husband and other adults and drifted into a place where she just needed to have understanding and empathy as to how hard it was to be in her situation. If she could have received this, her tolerance could have increased, warding off escalation. And consider Bill. After a hard day's work, his greatest need was to be engaged with somebody. And over the years, his engagement with his wife reduced significantly, and he lost contact with his brother. I want you to try to connect to your deep intrinsic needs for engagement with other people. This could include being validated, receiving empathy when you have hard stuff come in your life, being encouraged when you find yourself having to persevere in a difficult situation. Or it could be having time with another person when you feel comfortable letting your guard down. Perhaps it would just be time to be playful or laugh, just be yourself. Okay, you can begin to open your eyes and come back into the room. You know, loneliness in our busy North American society is fast becoming an epidemic. And what's worse is that when we attempt to engage, we often find that we don't have the skills to do so. Consider children, when they come together, how fast they engage. At one time, each of us had this skill. Now, as you stay in this reflective mode, I want you to go to your workbooks and answer each of these questions. Now I would like each person to take turns sharing the answer to their questions to the group. If any of you don't feel up to it, it's perfectly fine not to go, but instead listen to others. So before you leave today, I want to ask if each of you are willing to be presented with a challenge. Here it is. I want you to do an experiment with me this week and work towards increasing the level of your engagement in your life. And that will mean something different for every person. There are those here who have significant levels of engagement in their life. And there may be some others who do not have very much engagement, but they know what it takes to create more in their life. And still others who don't know how to do it. If that's you, I want you to reach out to somebody you know and trust and make contact with them. Or if you don't have anyone in your world that you can trust, contact one of our team members who will speak to you in confidence. Learning to increase the level of engagement in your life will bless you in virtually every area of your life. I also want to ask each of you to engage other people in this group at a deeper level. You can do this in many ways, including ensuring that you complete all your online dashboard exercises and being as honest as possible without oversharing as per our guidelines. Wow. Thanks for coming out to this group session and being with me. and with the people in this group. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.